I want to be ready to play tomorrow. So.
Get up.
Let's go back and do a quick review since it's been a few weeks since we've been together and had a chance to study. The book of Hebrews, the authorship is uncertain, although I tend to believe that probably it was written by St. Paul, but we don't know that for sure. Unlike most of his other writings, he does not identify. Whoever wrote it did not identify himself. It was written sometime around AD 70, but probably before the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, when Jerusalem, the whole city was just leveled. Because if that had happened, that would have proven his point. So the fact that he does not mention the fall of Jerusalem in the entire book as the sign of the end of the Old Covenant leads us to believe that it happened before the city was leveled by the 10th Legion of the Romans. The major theme of the book is persevering in faith in the incarnate Son of God, and in that, along that line, the writer says that Jesus Christ is superior to the prophets, to the angels, to Moses, and to Aaron. He offered a better priesthood, he offered a better sanctuary, he offered a better sacrifice, for in his worship we enter heaven. And therefore, the writer says, hold fast to Jesus Christ. Remember, the audience to which he wrote was an audience of Greek-speaking Jews. We don't know exactly where they were. They may have still been in Palestine, but essentially they had to be Greek-speaking because the book was written in Greek. But he was writing about Jewish issues. So that's why we know that they were Greek-speaking Jews. Basically, the whole idea is, why would, because these people were in the process of being persecuted, many of them were dropping out of the Christian church and out of the Christian faith and returning to their Jewish roots. And the writer writes to them and says, why are you doing this? Why are you going back to all of those things that under the Old Covenant were simply shadows of what has transpired in the New Covenant, the implementation of the New Covenant in Jesus Christ? Don't go back. Hold fast to this new revelation that God has given us in Jesus Christ. So, that's basically the theme, and we've gone through all of those things now, except we're going to start with the 39th verse of the 10th chapter of Hebrews, but I'm going to ask Michael to share something that he came across.
This was it's out of the 9th chapter of Hebrews. I have a replica of the papyrus that the 9th chapter of Hebrews is taken from in this commentary. And the important thing to me was the 9 begins at verse 12, but the last sentence of this struck me very, very hard. It says, the Levitical priesthood approached God through services at the tabernacle. The great high priest approaches God by entering once for all into the holy place. Here again, time and space vocabularies are interwoven. The death of Christ is an event within earthly history, taking place, as the creeds identify it, under Pontius Pilate. but it is also an event in eternity, the once-for-all entry of the Son, the great high priest, into the presence of God. His death is the true fulfillment of the sacrificial system, for he offered not the blood of an animal, but his own. His death is the climax of a life offered freely in obedience to the will of God, and is thus a working out in human experience of the inner meaning of the tabernacle worship, the offering of one's own life to God. And this is the part that really strikes me. And inasmuch as he is not only a man, the son of Mary, but also the Son, his life is at once the offering of God himself to men in his Son, and also the act of true human obedience, which at once fulfills and demonstrates the meaning of human existence.
Okay, thank you, that's, what a great summary.
That was written by Warren, I can't think of his last
And
name.
you said that this was based on the 9th chapter.
That's the 9th chapter.
And that would pick up, if we pick up, at verse 12 in the 9th chapter, kind of supplement what you're just saying, let me just read this for you. He, that is Jesus Christ, entered the most holy place once for all, having obtained eternal redemption. For if the blood of bulls and goats and the ashes of a heifer, sprinkling the unclean, sanctifies for the puring of flesh, how much more shall the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, cleanse your conscience from dead works to serve the living God. And that's basically, I think, that part of the chapter that he's writing about.
Yes.
Okay? Thank you for sharing that. Let's look at the 39th verse of the 10th chapter of Hebrews. And Peggy, I'll get you to read verse 39 from 10 to 11:3.
But we are not of those who draw back to perdition, but of those who believe to the saving of the soul. Faith's hope. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders obtained a good testimony. By faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that the things which are seen were not made of things which are visible.
Okay, what do you think he's referring to when he says, we are not of those who draw back to perdition? Who is he referring to?
He's referring to the ones that are staying in the faith of Christ and not going back to the old ways of the Jews.
That's exactly right, okay? Rather, he says, we're not going to go back to perdition, we are going to stay faithful to Christ and believe in him to the saving of our souls. He says faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. The commentary notes in the Orthodox Study Bible says this is not so much a definition of faith as a description of how faith works. Do you buy that, or you disagree with that, or?
I buy it.
Okay, why do you buy it?
Because these virtues are connected to actions. Faith works, love labors, hope produces patience, showing that salvation goes beyond attitudes to action.
Okay. Any other thoughts? The author of the commentary notes here says that this is not a definition of faith so much as it is a description of how faith works.
Isn't faith really our getting to know God? Our experience with God only comes through faith.
Right?
So, that's the way I believe it.
Someone once gave me a statement of what faith is, if you take it as almost like an acronym. Forsaking all, I trust him. That's faith.
Very good, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, he goes on to say, for by faith the elders obtained a good testimony. And then, in the remainder of that chapter, he talks about the elders, and we'll get to the elders in just a minute. But he goes on to say in that same verse, so that the things which are seen were not made of things which are visible. And I wrote a little note to myself there that I think that what he's talking about is that one of the failures that we have in our world today of science and a scientific worldview that has been impressed upon us since the age of the Enlightenment is that we think that we can only believe in things that we see. And what I think that what he is saying here is sometimes the things that we see are only shadows of what we don't see, and they are less real than what we don't see. You buy that? You agree with that? Disagree?
We see through a mirror darkly in this world, don't we?
Yep.
Well, didn't God create things? What he created out of what we know of as nothing.
Exactly. That was the other note that I put to myself in here. Creation out of nothing. God created the things that we see out of nothing. We're all used to Dave is a builder. He creates things. He creates beautiful homes with his hands. But he has lumber, and he has concrete, and he has steel, and he has wiring, and he has a lot of things that he works with. But he can't just speak a house into existence. At least not the last time I checked.
That's up to his wife.
But that's basically what what the writer is driving at here is, who is the word that spoke creation into existence? Christ, okay? This particular verse, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, has been a peg on the wall, if you will, for countless people who were struggling with life. And they believed that what they were struggling with today is not real. It's something we have to endure in this life, but it isn't real because only God is real, and the things of God are real, and if I can get through this, then I can claim the other. And I understand why people would believe that. Any questions or comments about that last verse of chapter 10 and the first 3 verses of chapter 11?
Are you putting that out there as a reality, that what we see is not real? Or that, you said that there are people that hang their hat on that, so to speak, that there's a reality, because if God's made it, it is real.
You think so?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Anybody disagree?
I think it's real, but
It's not eternal.
What they're saying, other things are more real because they're eternal,
Right.
and this is temporary.
Exactly.
But if we
Remember
start looking at it as being not real, then we're talking about things that God has created as being unreality. And that's a weird way to go. I don't think we
Well,
want to go
I'll
there.
cast my vote for the weird way.
See ya.
Maybe when
I'm
you
not
compare
going
it,
there.
maybe when you compare it to eternity.
Well, you know, in depth and longevity, yes, but not in, you know, you can't react with unreality, you know, and we do have to react with the reality that God has placed us in, you know.
But is this the real reality?
Right now.
Okay?
These
It's
things,
what we have to contend with.
well, these things will pass away, but
Okay.
it doesn't mean that they aren't real at the moment.
That was the purpose of Christ in the first place. Because we don't understand God, God said, look, I will make sure that you understand me, so I'm going to send my Son to you. And that's why I read the 9th chapter, 12th verse. It says, and inasmuch as he is not only a man, the son of Mary, but also the Son. That's a dual existence. His life at once is the offering of God himself to men in his Son, and also the act of true human obedience, which at once fulfills and demonstrates the meaning of human existence. That's what that all is. And so it fulfills what you're talking about, Gene, is that, you know, we are here, yes, but our real life is not here. Only is, and that's why it's done by faith, not by whatever else, any other mechanism.
Because we're always looking beyond what is right here around us.
Absolutely.
I've sat at the bedside of many, many people who are in the process of dying. And I can tell you that most of them did not want to hang on to this world any longer. They had reached the place in their lives and in their experiences where they believed that there was something else that was far more important to them than the real pain and the real hurt that they were experiencing right in that moment. And the only thing that got them through that moment was hanging on to that belief of what was out there. And I think that that's what the rest of the 11th chapter is all about.
I think that's what gets us through life now.
Okay?
I mean, in the world that we live in right now, without the hope of our salvation, without the knowledge that there will be a better place for us to go to, I don't think I could face the world and the darkness that's in it right now.
I'd be pretty glad.
It would be. I mean, how could you have hope?
Well, what was the point in St. Augustine's book, The City of God?
I haven't read it.
Never read.
We're waiting for you to tell us.
It's one of the great books of Christian history.
Okay.
Okay.
And the city
And you
of
wanna go with that?
Do
God,
you have it in your library that you
Well-
can go out?
the city of God was, he wrote it at a time when the Roman Empire was starting to crumble. And the people of the Roman Empire were devastated by that experience, because all they could see was, we are losing the city of man. And they have nothing else to hang on to. And Augustine wrote this beautiful book in which he contrasted the city of man with the city of God, to which people were, he held out the city of God, the heavenly Jerusalem, as that which is the real desire of the human soul. And that's when he read his famous line that our souls are restless until they rest in thee. As long as we're hung up on this world, we're just hung up on restless souls, that's all we can be. But if we believe that there is something else, look at verse 16 in the 11th chapter. Doris, what does that say?
16. But now they desire a better, that is, a heavenly country. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them.
Okay, and that's exactly what Augustine wrote about. That city that God has prepared for us, and the cities of this world are simply the cities of man. They're not eternal. Now, that is not, I'm not making light, Gail, of the fact that we have to contend with things in this world that really hurt us.
I think that the reason I challenged it is that I don't want us to embrace the idea that what is here is not real, because then God created a delusion, and we're all living in a delusional realm.
It's like Christian Science.
Well, I don't know about them, but that's, yeah, you're probably right about that, but because that's not true either. God made this that we are living in now, but he's made something a step beyond that that is so much better that this will look like vapor.
Okay, but
You
what
know.
is it that we lost when sin entered the world?
Communion with
Innocence.
God.
Yeah,
Mhm.
our relationship with God.
What was the place called? Paradise. Yeah, and so
Lost paradise.
we lost paradise. And
The paradise was
was
real.
real, and it was a place of perfection. But because of sin, humanity turned it into a place of imperfection and unreality. And as a result of that, if we go back to what we looked at months ago when we were studying Dietrich Bonhoeffer and what happened in Germany, the Germans came to believe that Hitler was the Messiah. And they came to believe that his definition of Christianity was the real definition of Christianity. And so they would hang swastikas all over their churches and place them on their altars and do all kinds of weird sacrilegious things. And they believed that he was real.
But isn't that the difference, though, not between reality and unreality, but between truth and falsehood?
Okay.
You know, I mean, whenever we lost the purity of paradise, we embraced falsehood, the lies of Satan.
Boy, you got it right there. Way to go. All right. That is exactly what happened.
But it's still true. I mean, it's not true, but it's still real. That's what I meant. There is a reality.
It is
to
really evil.
Right.
Yeah.
It is really evil. And I will certainly grant you that.
Well, that's nice of you.
Thank you very much.
But we have to remember that throughout history, we have gone through cycle after cycle after cycle where humanity has just embraced the most ungodly things imaginable and believed that we were embracing reality. And then all of those things disappeared. And those people disappeared.
We have two examples I think are kind of trite biblically, but they're still real. Sarah came with child at the age of about 100. That's physically speaking not possible. The walls of Jericho fell by a conquering technique that was unheard of. It's still unheard of. Dancing around a wall and it fell to the ground. So
Marching.
those things are real, but they were accomplished by basically unreal means. I don't know how to put that.
stay in the
The,
horns.
Other worlds, okay. Well, they are accomplished through God.
Yes, by
God
God,
made it possible.
yeah. And that is God is the reality,
That's
period.
But we tend to not believe the reality of God always. I mean, because we can't feel or touch it.
What does St. Paul say in the first chapter of his letter to the Romans? What do human beings worship? Do they worship the Creator, or do they worship the created? Or creation? Yeah. We worship that which has been created. We worship created things. And that is the fundamental sin of humanity. And we tie our existence to our automobiles, or we tie our existence to our jobs, or we tie our existence to political accomplishments,
Or our video collection.
or our video collection.
Or even our well-being,
Exactly.
Yeah.
yeah.
And we worship,
Stuff. Stuff.
we worship
Stuff.
stuff.
Well, all that is the stuff that separates us from God in the first place.
Okay, and that is the whole point of the 11th chapter,
Okay.
is that we, the people that he enumerates in here, by faith Abel offered to God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain. By faith Enoch was taken away, so that he did not see death. By faith Noah, being divinely warned of things had not yet seen, moved with godly fear. By faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would receive as an inheritance, and he went out not knowing where he was going. He waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. By faith Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed, and she bore a child. And then he does a little summary here in verses 13 through 16. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off were assured of them. Now, they could not see. I don't think that any of them saw an infant in a stable being born in Bethlehem. All they knew was God had something in store by which he was going to save the world. And that's what they built their entire existence on that.
And they were one tiny step toward that birth in Bethlehem.
Exactly, they were just one tiny step. And then he goes on and he starts to talk about, by faith Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. By faith Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau. By faith Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph and worshiped leaning on the top of his staff. By faith Joseph, when he was dying, made mention of the departure of the children of Israel and gave instructions concerning his bones. By faith Moses, then he moves into a whole new series here. Moses, when he was born, was hidden 3 months by his parents. And then in verses 24 and 25 and 26, he gives a little summary about Moses. Let's look at that. By faith Moses, when he became of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Now, why did he do that? I mean, he lived in the palace.
Yes, but he saw. He saw and knew the wrong and the right of it.
Okay.
That his people were suffering and that he was being led by God to do something about it.
I think it had a lot to do that he was raised by his mother.
Exactly.
Okay, look at verse 25. Read that for us, Peggy.
Choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin.
Okay,
esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt.
okay, so here I have a position, I have wealth, I have pleasures that all are associated with the royal life in Egypt, and he looked beyond that, and he saw those as shadows, if you will, dark shadows of the reality of God. And he chose God. Okay? Now, let's look on at the rest of the chapter here. Dennis, can I get you to read verses 39, chapter 11, 39 through 12, 2.
39 through what?
12, 2.
12.
Okay. And these all, having obtained a good report through faith, received not the promise, God having provided some better thing for us, that they without us should not be made perfect. Therefore, seeing we also are, let's see, what's that word?
Surrounded?
Okay, this is
Encompassed.
compasses.
Encompasses.
Yeah. About with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. Looking unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and it set down at the right hand of the throne of God.
Okay? What an enormously beautiful text. What an enormously beautiful piece of writing. Well, let's go back and look at verse 39 where he says all of these that he's been naming, and he goes starting in verse 32 of the 11th chapter, and what more shall I say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith subdued kingdoms, worked righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, became valiant in battle, turned to fight the armies of the aliens, women received their dead raised to life again. Wow. But what he is saying here is that in spite of all that they did it because they were looking beyond what was happening to them in that moment.
And that's, that is such a, it's such a horrible problem in our culture. We don't.
Go with that.
We don't look beyond. We don't want God. We don't want anything out there. We want everything right now. And I want it right now. I want it when I want it. And I want it how I want it. And so Satan uses that to keep us ensnared and trapped in the evil in our culture.
Yeah,
And in the world.
okay, and where can you see all of that portrayed so very, in a sense, promisingly? All of this, huh?
Nothing else in Washington, D.C.
Oh, yeah.
Hollywood, Las Vegas, any of those.
What about the advertisements on television?
Oh, yeah.
What do they hold out?
Oh, yeah.
You know, the real life is you're 18 to 20. You're 18 to 25. You have a guitar, you drive a luxury automobile, you're always partying with your friends,
And you have a free phone.
and you have a free phone, and nothing ever seems to get in the way of your having everything that you want. And oh, by the way, there's nothing at all in all of this about any kind of work by which you make provision for any of these things. Or the fact that any of your bud-popping friends may get too drunk and end up in a hospital, maybe even dying. None of that. It's all that one picture, that the good life that they hold up. And Hebrews is saying, but that is just a shadow. It isn't real. God is real. Heaven is real. This world will all go away. Now, let's go back and ask ourselves, let's look back over in the book of Matthew. In the book.
The book of
Matthew.
Close to the end of Matthew. I got things flipping all over the place.
One of the,
Which chapter?
chapter 27.
Okay.
Let's look at verse 50. You haven't read it. Let's get you to read verse 50 through
Quick, get the heat out.
50 through 54, okay?
50 through 50.
Yeah, and you have a nice loud voice so you can project all the way to the far end.
And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. Then behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And the earth quaked, and the rocks were split, and the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the graves after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. So when the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and the things that had happened, they feared greatly, saying, "Truly, this was the Son of God."
Okay? Who do you think are the bodies of the saints who've fallen asleep?
All those who had died in faith.
Okay, and who are we talking about? Those who died in faith.
All those that just
The
they've
new
been
covenant.
talking about.
Yeah, the new covenant. Those are,
Samuel and
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Sarah.
Exactly. It has always been the belief of the church that that particular verse where certain dead people had been set free from the grave and went about the city and appeared to many were all of those saints of the Old Testament that are enumerated in the 11th chapter of Hebrews. Because they could not see the cross where they were. They could not see Christ, but they lived in hope of what God was going to do to deliver His creation someday. And now it had happened, and they were set free from the grave and resurrected to go to heaven. Now, you believe that? You don't believe it? You wanna argue with it or what?
Did anybody recognize him because it had been so long? How would he?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It doesn't say.
Well, after something like that would happen, you'd think that would, you know, send quite a stir through the whole ancient world.
Well, you would have thought so. Apparently it didn't, convince everybody in Jerusalem.
Well, they probably didn't recognize them, do you think, Dennis?
I wouldn't think they
Pictures back
would
then.
because, yeah, they didn't have pictures and unless they said that, well, I'm Sarah, you know.
Yeah.
And then I wonder if they would believe him.
Yeah, the point that I'm trying to make here is that we've gone through this whole list of people in the 11th chapter about people who lived in faith, and then we come to the 27th chapter of Matthew, and we have this interesting reference, and it's just in that one text, only in Matthew's gospel, where he says that those who had fallen asleep were raised, and coming out of the graves after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. And my point is just simply, the church has always believed that that was the fulfillment of their faith. Think about it.
If you don't believe it, then what do you think God was going to allow? Them just to rot and, you know, they would have nothing in eternity?
Well, what does that verse promise us?
Promise us a like process.
Okay,
Right, yeah?
yeah.
Gene,
With a heavenly body, just like Christ?
but Christ hadn't been risen by that time, had he?
No, he was dying, he was just hanging there on the cross dying.
Okay, so they would not be incorruptible. The incorruption happens after Jesus was raised, wasn't it? The people would be raised incorruptible
I
after
think
that?
God could raise those people incorruptible if he wanted to.
But there's
whenever.
nothing in Scripture about it.
Wasn't there, the comment that's made to that verse, I think is interesting because it says, the completeness of the salvation won by Christ is signified in the resurrection of the saints from the Old Testament. This guarantees the promise given to Ezekiel, in Ezekiel 37, 1-14, that God can and one day will open the graves of all mankind. The saints entering the holy city is an icon of resurrected humanity entering the heavenly Jerusalem. It's an icon for us, but it was a fact. It did happen.
Okay.
And there's no basis in Scripture anywhere for people facing death twice. You know, if they were raised then, they were incorruptible.
Except for Lazarus.
Well, we don't know that he died again.
Yes, we do. That's what the book says.
Where does it say that?
What, that Lazarus died?
That he died a second time?
Oh, no, they don't need to say he died the second time. He has the dinner.
Well, he could have been taken up, you know.
He could have
Enoch was
been.
taken up.
But that wasn't the important part of the Lazarus story.
Well, there you go.
Jesus is always leaving us with questions.
Okay,
all
it's almost 7:30, so it's time for us to wrap things up. Next week, weather permitting, we will look at the 13th chapter and the conclusion of Hebrews, and then on the 5th of March, we will celebrate Ash Wednesday. We will not have a dinner that night. We will simply come at 6 o'clock for a special service celebrating Ash Wednesday. We will have dinner on Tuesday night, the night before. We'll have Shrove Tuesday. What's that? Yeah.
She was No dinner? And I'm like, no,
Shrove
Shrove Tuesday.
Tuesday.
This is what
Oh,
they said on the 5th of March, I had an appointment, and it was a Thursday.
well then I guess their calendar's a bit screwed up.
Maybe off
Isn't
a
that
year
when
or
we
something
go
like
down?
that.
I thought it was
Anyway,
the 6th.
Anyway, on the 4th of March, we will have
Maybe
Shrove
it's
Tuesday dinner. And be planning now to bring lots of good fattening things, because that's Fat Tuesday, so.
You can't eat that.
Huh?
You can't eat that.
No, I know that, but
Okay.
but
Jack
maybe you,
Sprat,
Keep
you
that
need
in
no
mind.
fat.
Why could he know
and
where-
then on